Welcome to the reading of the Sabbath School lesson for the second quarter of 2022. Welcome to Lesson 7 in the series on Genesis, titled The Covenant with Abraham, ready for teaching on May 14, and I'm Percy Harrold. Wednesday, May 11, the Son of Promise. The last scene of circumcision involved everyone. Not only Ishmael, but also all the males of Abraham's household were circumcised, as we read in Genesis 17:23-27. So Abraham took Ishmael his son, all who were born in his house, and all who were bought with his money, every male among them of Abraham's house, and circumcised the flesh of their foreskins that very same day, as God had said to him. Abraham was 99 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, and Ishmael his son was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. That very same day Abraham was circumcised, and his son Ishmael, and all the men of his house, born in the house or bought with money from a foreigner, were circumcised with him. The word 𝐃𝐎, K-O-L, all, every, is repeated 4 times in this passage. It is against this inclusive background that God appears to Abraham to confirm the promise of a son, Isaac. Read Genesis chapter 18, verses 1-15, and Romans 9, verse 9. What lessons of hospitality do we learn from Abraham's reception of his visitors? How do you explain God's response to Abraham's hospitality? Genesis 18, beginning at verse 1. Then the Lord appeared to him by the terebinth trees of Mamre, as he was sitting in the tent door in the heat of the day. So he lifted his eyes and looked, and behold, 3 men were standing by him. And when he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them, and bowed himself to the ground, and said, My Lord, if I have now found favour in your sight, do not pass on by your servant. Please let a little water be brought, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree, and I will bring a morsel of bread, that you may refresh your hearts. After that you may pass by, inasmuch as you have come to your servant. They said, Do as you have said. So Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah and said, Quickly, make ready 3 measures of fine meal, knead it and make cakes. And Abraham ran to the herd, took a tender and good calf, gave it to a young man, and he hastened to prepare it. So he took butter and milk and the calf which he had prepared, and set it before them. And he stood by them under the tree as they ate. Then they said to him, Where is Sarah your wife? And he said, Here in the tent. And he said, I will certainly return to you according to the time of life, and behold, Sarah your wife shall have a son. Sarah was listening in the tent door, which was behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, well advanced in age, and Sarah had passed the age of childbearing. Therefore Sarah laughed within herself, saying, After I have grown old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also? And the Lord said to Abraham, Why did Sarah laugh, saying, Shall I surely bear a child, since I am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the appointed time I will return to you according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son. But Sarah denied it, saying, I did not laugh, for she was afraid. And he said, No, but you did laugh. And Romans 9, verse 9, For this is the word of promise. At this time I will come, and Sarah shall have a son. It's not clear whether Abraham knew who these strangers were. As we read in Hebrews 13:2, Do not forget to entertain strangers, for by so doing some have unwittingly entertained angels, even though he acted toward them as if God himself were among them. He was sitting in the tent door in the heat of the day, we read in verse 1 of chapter 18, and because visitors are rare in the desert, he was probably longing to meet with them. Abraham ran toward the men, we read in verse 2, though he was 99 years old. He called one of these persons Adonai, my Lord, in verse 3, a title often used for God, as we read in Genesis 20, verse 4, but Abimelech had not come near her, and he said, Lord, will you slay a righteous nation also? And Exodus chapter 15 and verse 17. You will bring them in and plant them in the mountain of your inheritance, in the place, O Lord, which you have made for your own dwelling, the sanctuary, O Lord, which your hands have established. He rushed around them in the preparation of the meal, we read in verses 6 and 7. He stood next to them, attentive to their needs and ready to serve them, we saw in verse 8. Abraham's behaviour toward heavenly strangers will become an inspirational model of hospitality, as we read in Hebrews 13 verse 2. In fact, Abraham's attitude of reverence conveys a philosophy of hospitality. Showing respect and care toward strangers is not just a nice gesture of courtesy. The Bible emphasizes that it is a religious duty, as if directed toward God himself, as you read in Matthew 25, verses 35 to 40. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. Then the righteous will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? When did we see you a stranger and take you in, or naked and clothe you? Or when did we see you sick or in prison and come to you? And the king will answer and say to them, Assuredly I say to you, inasmuch as you did it to one of the least of these my brethren, you did it to me. Ironically, God is identified more with the hungry and needy foreigner than with the generous one who receives them. On the other hand, the divine intrusion into the human sphere denotes his grace and love toward humanity. This appearance of God anticipates Christ, who left his heavenly home and became a human servant to reach humankind, as you read in Philippians 2, 7 and 8, but made himself of no reputation, taking the form of a bondservant and coming in the likeness of men. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even the death of the cross. God's appearance here provides evidence for the certainty of his promise. We read in verse 10, He sees Sarah, who hides herself behind him. Genesis 18 verse 10, And he said, I will certainly return to you according to the time of life, and behold, Sarah your wife shall have a son. Sarah was listening in the tent door, which was behind him, and knows her most intimate thoughts. We read in verse 12 as well. Therefore Sarah laughed within herself, saying, After I have grown old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also? He knows that she laughed, and the word laugh is his last word. Her skepticism becomes the place where he will fulfill his word. And so to finish today, dwell more on the idea that God is identified more with the hungry and needy foreigner than with the generous one who receives them. Why is this concept so important for us to remember? This lesson was read by Dr. Percy Harrold for Christian Services for the Blind. Sponsored by the Sabbath School Department and distributed through Hope Channel Australia, this podcast is also redistributed by Hope Channel Germany, Christian Record Services for the Blind, and It Is Written. It is also available on SoundCloud and through multiple podcast distributors, including Apple iTunes. Remember, God is always faithful.